Isaac Sullivan didn't expect his day to get any worse until he spilled coffee all over his only clean shirt 5 minutes before meeting the new woman he was supposed to show around town. He cursed under his breath, trying to pat the damp spot dry with a napkin as he stood outside the visitor center. His 5-year-old son Thomas tugged at his hand impatiently. "Daddy, she's here," Thomas whispered loudly, pointing. Isaac looked up just in time to see a woman step out of a sleek black car. She was stunning. Long dark hair, soft brown eyes, a confident way she held herself. Way too polished for this sleepy little town. She smiled as she approached, and Isaac felt like he was seeing sunlight for the first time in months. "Hi, I'm Fallon Spencer," she said, extending a hand. Her voice was warm, genuine. Isaac shook her hand, feeling a jolt he didn't expect. "Isaac Sullivan, and this is my little sidekick, Thomas." Thomas grinned up at Fallon, already charmed. Fallon leaned down a little. "Hi, Thomas, I'm really happy to meet you." Isaac cleared his throat, trying to focus. "All right, ready to see what our little town's got to offer," Fallon laughed softly. "Lead the way, tour guide." The morning passed in a blur. Isaac showed her the old Main Street, the farmer's market, the community garden. She asked questions about everything, genuinely curious, laughing at Thomas's endless commentary, and somehow making Isaac feel like he wasn't just some washed-up mechanic barely keeping it together. "You're not from around here, are you?" Isaac asked as they walked past the lake. Fallon shrugged with a small smile. "Not even close, I just moved in for work. Big change." Isaac nodded. "Yeah, I bet, this town's slow. Most people come here to get away from everything." She looked out over the water, her expression unreadable. "Sometimes getting away is exactly what you need." There was something in the way she said it that made Isaac wonder what she was running from, but it wasn't his business. Thomas tugged on Isaac's arm. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" Isaac hesitated. Money was tight, real tight. But Fallon caught the look on his face and smiled. "My treat," she said quickly. "A thank you for the tour." Isaac opened his mouth to protest, but the excited look on Thomas's face shut him up. Pride could take a backseat today. They sat outside the little ice cream shop, Thomas happily devouring a double scoop while Fallon and Isaac talked. She was easy to be around, funny, and real in a way he didn't expect from someone with designer shoes and a car that probably cost more than his house. He found himself telling her about his life, how he lost his wife 3 years ago, how he was trying to raise Thomas alone, how the garage he worked at barely kept them afloat. He didn't know why he was spilling his guts to a woman he'd just met. Maybe it was the way she listened, like nothing else in the world mattered. Fallon stirred her ice cream thoughtfully. "You're doing a pretty amazing job, you know." Isaac gave a short laugh. "Doesn't feel like it most days." "Well, you are," Fallon said firmly. "Thomas is lucky to have you." Isaac looked down, feeling emotions he didn't want to examine too closely. When they finished, Fallon checked her watch and stood reluctantly. "I should go. I have some meetings." Isaac stood too, brushing off his jeans. "Right, well. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thank you for the tour, I really mean it." She hesitated, then added, "Would you maybe show me more of the town sometime, if you're not too busy?" Isaac blinked, surprised. She could have asked anyone. Why him? But the way she was looking at him made it impossible to say no. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "I'd like that." Fallon's smile widened, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. "Come on, buddy," Isaac said to Thomas, reaching for his hand. As they walked away, he glanced over his shoulder. Fallon was still standing there, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite name. Later that night, after Thomas was asleep, Isaac sat on the worn-out couch, thinking about her, Fallon Spencer. There was something about her he couldn't shake, something that made him feel alive again for the first time in years. He didn't know that Fallon sat in her hotel suite at that very moment, staring out at the town she was about to own. Spencer Industries was quietly buying up properties here, planning to rejuvenate the economy and thinking about the struggling, kind-hearted man who had no idea she was a CEO worth millions. And even less idea that she was already falling for him. Fallon closed her laptop and leaned back against the couch, smiling softly to herself. She had come here to build a business. Instead, she might just be building a future she never dared dream of. And it all started with one small town dad who had no idea he was about to change her life. Fallon found herself lingering in front of the small diner on Main Street, the scent of fresh baked bread and sizzling bacon drifting through the air. She had barely slept, her mind tangled in thoughts of Isaac and the easy way he had made her laugh. It was reckless, dangerous even, getting involved with someone who didn't know who she truly was. But something about him, about the life he was fighting to build for his son, made it impossible to stay away. Inside, Isaac was wiping down the counter, his faded blue t-shirt clinging to broad shoulders. Thomas sat on a stool, swinging his legs and coloring a paper placemat with heavy concentration. Fallon pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming softly. Isaac glanced up, surprise flickering across his face before it settled into something warmer. "Didn't expect to see you here." Thomas looked up too, his face lighting up. "Miss Fallon." "Look, I made a dragon," Fallon crossed to him, leaning down to admire the crayon-drawn creature with exaggerated wings and a crooked smile. "That's incredible. You're an artist." Isaac tossed the rag into a bucket behind the counter. "We're just killing time before I head into the garage." Fallon hesitated, then slid onto the stool next to Thomas. "I was hoping you might show me that nature trail you mentioned yesterday, if you have time." Isaac glanced at the clock. "I've got a couple hours." "Let me just call my boss and let him know I'll be late." While Isaac stepped into the back, Fallon chatted with Thomas, learning about his favorite superheroes and the treehouse he and his dad were trying to build. Thomas spoke with such pride about Isaac that Fallon's chest ached. When Isaac returned, he grabbed his jacket from a hook by the door. "We're all set. If you're sure you don't mind Thomas tagging along." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Fallon said easily. The trail wound behind the town, skirting a creek and climbing into the woods. Thomas darted ahead, chasing butterflies and pointing out every interesting rock and fallen log. Isaac walked beside Fallon, hands shoved deep into his pockets. "So what brought you here, really? I mean, besides the scenery?" Fallon picked her steps carefully over the uneven ground. "A fresh start, I guess. My old life. It wasn't what I thought it would be." She kept her tone light, but Isaac didn't miss the shadow that crossed her face. He didn't press. Instead, he said, "Well, you picked a good place. People here might be nosy, but they're good-hearted." "Like you," Fallon teased, nudging him lightly with her shoulder. Isaac laughed, a deep, rough sound that made Fallon's stomach flutter. "I guess you'll have to find out for yourself." They reached a clearing where the creek widened into a shallow pool. Thomas immediately kicked off his shoes and waded in, shrieking with laughter as the cold water splashed up his legs. Fallon watched him, a wistful smile tugging at her lips. "He's amazing." Isaac sat down on an old log, stretching out his legs. "He's my whole world." Fallon hesitated, then sat beside him, close enough that their knees brushed. "It must be hard, doing it all on your own." Isaac shrugged one shoulder. "You don't think about hard, you just do it. Because they need you." He said it so simply, but Fallon heard the weight behind the words. The sacrifices, the loneliness. She wanted to reach out to touch his hand, but she held back. She had no right to intrude when she was still hiding so much. Instead, she said softly, "You're stronger than you know." Isaac turned his head, studying her. "You say that like you know something about it." Fallon met his gaze, her heart thudding painfully. "Maybe I do." Before either of them could say more, Thomas called out, "Daddy, look." "Tadpoles?" Isaac chuckled and pushed to his feet. "Come on, I'll show you how to catch one." Fallon stayed on the log, watching father and son crouch by the water's edge. The easy affection between them, the way Isaac ruffled Thomas's hair when he got too excited, it was everything Fallon had never had growing up. And everything she hadn't realized she wanted until now. When they finally headed back to town, Thomas dragging his feet and yawning, Fallon offered to drive them home. Isaac hesitated, then agreed. He gave her directions to a modest house on the outskirts of town, its paint peeling and the porch steps sagging. Fallon parked by the curb, her throat tightening. He deserved so much more than this. "Thanks for today," Isaac said as he unbuckled Thomas from the back seat. "You didn't have to spend your afternoon with us." Fallon smiled, blinking against the sudden sting of tears. "I didn't have to. I wanted to." Isaac looked like he wanted to say more, but Thomas tugged on his arm, yawning again. "Come on, buddy. Bedtime." Fallon watched them walk up the path, Thomas leaning against his father's side. She sat there long after they disappeared inside, the engine ticking as it cooled. Fallon had come to this town planning to keep her distance, to do her job and leave. But Isaac and Thomas were pulling her in deeper every second, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep her secrets hidden. Not when her heart already wasn't hers anymore. Fallon leaned against the railing at the town's weekly outdoor market, feeling the gentle hum of the community around her. Vendors called out their daily specials, children darted between stalls with sticky fingers and wide grins, and a local band strummed cheerful tunes from the gazebo. It was all so vivid, so real, so utterly different from the polished boardrooms and sterile hotels she was used to. Isaac arrived with Thomas perched on his shoulders, the boy laughing as he pointed out a stall selling homemade kites. Fallon's heart gave a strange little twist. She hadn't even realized she was smiling until Isaac caught her eye. "You're early," Isaac said, lowering Thomas carefully to the ground. Fallon shrugged, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "I thought I'd get a feel for the place before the crowd really kicked in." Thomas tugged on Isaac's hand insistently. "Can we go see the kites, Daddy, please?" Isaac glanced at Fallon. "You mind, lead the way," Fallon said, falling into step beside them. At the kite stall, Thomas ran his fingers reverently over the bright fabrics, his face full of awe. Fallon watched him, her mind ticking. She had spent so much on meaningless things before: designer bags, jewelry, dinners she barely tasted. Yet a simple kite had lit up this boy's entire world. The vendor, an older woman with sun-kissed skin and a warm smile, leaned over the table. "Find one you like, sweetie." Thomas hesitated, his fingers lingering on a blue kite with silver stars. Isaac crouched down. "Not today, buddy." "Maybe next time." Fallon saw the flash of disappointment on Thomas's face before he masked it with a small nod. Something inside her tightened. "I'll take the blue one with the stars," Fallon said casually, pulling out her wallet before Isaac could protest. Isaac straightened, his jaw tightening. "Fallon, you don't have to, I want to," she interrupted gently, handing the vendor a few bills. "Consider it a thank you for being my guide." Thomas clutched the kite to his chest with a shy grin. "Thank you, Miss Fallon." Fallon crouched to meet his eyes. "You're welcome, Thomas. You'll have to show me how high you can fly it." Isaac didn't argue further, but there was a tension in his shoulders as they moved on through the market. Fallon knew she had overstepped, but she didn't regret it. Some things were worth it. They stopped by a booth selling lemonade. Fallon bought 3 cups, handing one to Isaac without a word. He accepted it with a quiet thanks, his fingers brushing hers briefly, sending a jolt up her arm. They found a spot near the gazebo where Thomas could run a short distance without getting lost in the crowd. Fallon sipped her lemonade, watching Isaac out of the corner of her eye. "You don't like accepting help, do you?" she asked after a moment. Isaac blew out a breath, watching Thomas dart after a butterfly. "It's not about pride, it's about standing on my own 2 feet. Teaching Thomas that we make do with what we have." Fallon nodded slowly. "That's admirable, but sometimes, letting people in isn't weakness, it's trust." Isaac looked at her, really looked at her, and for a heartbeat, Fallon thought he might say something. But he only nodded once and shifted his gaze back to his son. They stayed until the sun dipped low, bathing the market in golden light. Isaac offered to walk Fallon to her car, Thomas skipping ahead with his new kite fluttering behind him. At her car, Isaac hesitated. "Thanks for today." Fallon leaned against the door, searching his face. "Thank you for letting me be part of it." For a moment, they just stood there, the air between them thick with something unspoken. Fallon opened her mouth, unsure what she even planned to say, when Thomas called out from the sidewalk. "Daddy, come see, I got it in the air." Isaac chuckled, the tension breaking. "Duty calls." Fallon watched him jog back to his son, her chest aching with something she didn't dare name yet. She climbed into her car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. She was falling harder than she ever intended, and the guilt gnawed at her. Isaac deserved honesty. He deserved to know that she wasn't just some woman new to town. She was Fallon Spencer, CEO of Spencer Industries, the woman whose company was about to change this town forever. And if he found out the truth too late, she might lose the only thing that had ever felt truly real. The next morning, Fallon stood before the mirror in her rented cottage. adjusting the simple navy dress she had chosen for the town council meeting. She was there to finalize the deal for Spencer Industries to purchase several key properties revitalizing the town, bringing new jobs, new opportunities. It was supposed to be a good thing. But now, all she could think about was Isaac, about how this deal might impact his garage, his life, his son. She couldn't back out, the contracts were already in motion. But maybe she could soften the blow, find a way to make sure he wasn't left behind. Pulling her shoulders back, Fallon grabbed her portfolio and headed out the door. At the town hall, she slipped into the small auditorium. The mayor, a rotund man with a booming voice, greeted her effusively, drawing attention she didn't want. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught movement. Isaac, standing near the back with a few other local business owners. He hadn't seen her yet, too busy talking with a gray-haired woman Fallon vaguely recognized from the diner, her stomach twisted. He was here because he cared about this town, about the future he was trying to build for Thomas. And he had no idea that the woman he had trusted was sitting on the other side of the table. The meeting began, the mayor launching into a speech about progress and prosperity. Fallon barely heard him, her gaze flicking to Isaac again and again. When her name was called to present, she stood on legs that felt unsteady. She walked to the front of the room, her heart pounding so hard it drowned out the polite applause. As she turned to face the crowd, her eyes met Isaac's. Confusion flickered across his face. Then realization. Then betrayal. Fallon's voice caught in her throat. This was the moment everything changed, and she wasn't sure if she could fix what was about to be broken. Fallon's palms felt clammy against the cool wood of the podium. For a moment, she couldn't find her voice, the expectant buzz of the crowd pressing in on her. Isaac's gaze stayed locked onto hers, hard and unyielding. There was no warmth left in it. She forced herself to speak, presenting the revitalization project in crisp, professional terms. She outlined the plans for the new business district, the grants available for local owners to modernize, the projected increase in tourism. Each word tasted like ash on her tongue. When she finished, polite applause filled the room, but Isaac didn't move. Fallon gathered her materials and stepped down, her heart hammering. She needed to talk to him, explain. Somehow, outside, the late afternoon sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Fallon spotted Isaac walking away, Thomas holding his hand tightly. She hurried after them. "Isaac, wait," she called. He stopped but didn't turn. His shoulders were rigid, his hand firm on Thomas's. Fallon reached them, breathless. "Please, just give me a minute." Isaac turned slowly, his face unreadable. Thomas looked from one to the other, sensing the tension. Fallon knelt down. "Hey, Thomas, would you mind going to the playground over there? I'll be right here." Isaac hesitated, then gave a tight nod. "Stay where I can see you," he said. Thomas ran off, glancing back once before kicking a small stone along the path. Fallon straightened, facing Isaac fully. "I should have told you I wanted to. I was scared." Isaac crossed his arms, his voice low and rough. "Scared of what? That a mechanic from a dying town wasn't good enough for a CEO? That's not it," Fallon said, feeling the sting of his words. "I didn't come here to judge anyone. I came here to fix something broken in my own life. I didn't expect to meet you or Thomas. I didn't expect to care." Isaac's jaw tightened. "You had 100 chances to tell me the truth. Every time you smiled at me, every time you bought him something we couldn't afford. Every time you let us believe you were one of us." Fallon swallowed hard. "I didn't see you as some project or charity. I saw you as the strongest man I've ever met, and I fell in love with you." Isaac's expression flickered, something raw flashing through it before he shut it down. "You think saying that fixes it?" "No," Fallon whispered. "It doesn't fix anything, but it's the truth." They stood there, the distance between them feeling wider than the entire town. Fallon knew she couldn't force him to forgive her. She hadn't earned it. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope, offering it to him. "What's this?" Isaac asked warily. "A grant application," Fallon said. "Specifically tailored for your garage. Upgrades, expansion, anything you need to keep it running and thriving. No strings attached. No hidden motives." Isaac didn't take the envelope. "I don't want your money," he said. "It's not charity," Fallon said fiercely. "It's a chance, one you deserve, one Thomas deserves." Isaac's gaze flicked to the playground, where Thomas was now trying to balance on one foot atop a rock. He looked back at Fallon, his voice quieter but no less firm. "What happens when you leave?" he asked. Fallon shook her head. "I don't want to leave, not anymore. I want to stay, if you'll let me." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he exhaled slowly, the fight draining from his posture. "I need time," he said. Fallon nodded, blinking back the sting of tears. "Take all the time you need." Isaac finally took the envelope, tucking it under his arm without looking at it. He walked to the playground, scooping Thomas up and tossing him onto his shoulders. Thomas's laughter floated back to her. Light and free, Fallon stood there alone, watching them. She didn't know if she had lost everything or if she had just planted the first fragile seed of something real. 3 days passed with no word. Fallon kept herself busy, attending meetings, walking the trails Isaac had shown her, trying not to jump every time her phone buzzed. On the 4th night, she heard a knock at her door. She opened it to find Isaac standing there, Thomas half asleep against his shoulder, his small arms wrapped around Isaac's neck. "Can we come in?" Isaac asked. Fallon stepped aside, heart in her throat. Isaac carried Thomas to the couch and settled him down gently. The boy mumbled something incoherent and curled into the cushions, out cold. Isaac turned back to her, his face unreadable. "I read the grant proposal," he said. "It's solid, fair." Fallon waited, barely breathing. "I talked to some of the other guys in town," he continued. "You're not just buying up property, you're investing in people. In the town." Fallon nodded, her voice shaky. "That's what I wanted." Isaac stepped closer, his hands flexing at his sides. "I hated you for a minute," he said bluntly. "Felt like you made a fool out of me." Fallon didn't flinch. "She deserved that. But then I realized," Isaac said, his voice softer now, "you're the only person who's tried to give me something without expecting anything back." Fallon's eyes filled with tears. "I don't care about your money," Isaac said. "I don't care about your title. I care about how you look at my son, how you looked at me when you thought I had nothing to offer you." Fallon let out a shaky breath. "You offered me everything I didn't even know I was looking for." Isaac closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He cupped her face in his calloused hands, his touch gentle but sure. "I'm not good at this," he murmured. "I've been scared to let anyone in for a long time." Fallon covered his hands with hers. "Me too." He kissed her then, a kiss that was fierce and tender all at once, tasting of hope and second chances. Fallon melted against him, the weight of secrets and fear lifting from her shoulders. When they finally pulled apart, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said simply. Fallon smiled through her tears. "I was hoping you'd say that." Behind them, Thomas stirred, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Miss Fallon," he mumbled. Fallon crossed to the couch and knelt beside him. "I'm right here." Thomas blinked at her, then smiled and reached for her hand. Isaac watched them, something unspoken passing between him and Fallon. A promise. A beginning. Later that night, as they sat together on the porch, Thomas asleep inside, Isaac slipped his arm around Fallon's shoulders. "You know," he said, his voice low, "this town's got a way of surprising you." Fallon leaned into him, feeling more at home than she ever had in any penthouse or boardroom. "I'm counting on it," she whispered. Above them, the stars stretched across the sky, endless and full of possibility. And for the first time in a long time, Fallon knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Fallon woke to the soft, golden light of morning filtering through the gauzy curtains of the small cottage. Isaac's arm was draped over her waist, his chest warm against her back as he breathed steadily in sleep. For a long moment, she simply lay there, savoring the quiet reality of it. No board meetings, no endless travel, no empty hotel rooms, just this. Carefully, she slipped from the bed, pulling on one of Isaac's shirts that hung loose around her frame. She padded into the kitchen, finding Thomas already awake, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal and a comic book spread open in front of him. He looked up, grinning. "Morning, Miss Fallon." "Good morning, Thomas," Fallon said, ruffling his hair as she passed. "Sleep well." "Yep, Daddy snores loud," Thomas confided, making her laugh softly. She busied herself making coffee, the familiar ritual grounding her. Isaac appeared a few minutes later, still rumpled from sleep, his hand scrubbing through his hair. "You're up early," he said, his voice gravelly. Fallon handed him a mug. "Habit." Isaac took a long sip, then rested his hip against the counter, watching her. "You sure you're ready for this?" Fallon tilted her head. "Ready for what?" "All of it," he said, his gaze steady. "Small town life, me, Thomas." She set her mug down and crossed to him, placing her hands flat against his chest where she could feel the steady beat of his heart. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," she said simply. Isaac lowered his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her skin. "Good, because we're pretty attached to you already." Thomas piped up from the table, waving his spoon. "I'm super attached," Isaac chuckled, wrapping his arms around Fallon's waist. "Guess you're stuck with us." Fallon smiled, a deep, certain kind of happiness blooming in her chest. "That's exactly what I want." Later that day, they walked into town together, Thomas clutching Fallon's hand as they made their way down Main Street. People waved and called greetings, and Fallon returned each one with genuine warmth. She no longer felt like an outsider here. She belonged. At the community garden, a small crowd had gathered. The mayor stood in front of a newly erected sign that reads Spencer Community Garden, a wide grin on his face. Fallon blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected any kind of recognition. The mayor cleared his throat. "Today, we officially thank Fallon Spencer, whose generosity and vision are helping breathe new life into our town. This garden will serve as a place for all our families to grow together." Isaac gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Fallon stepped forward, cheeks flushing. "Thank you. This town has given me far more than I could ever give back. I'm honored to be part of it." Applause broke out, and Fallon spotted a few familiar faces from the diner and market, smiling warmly at her. Afterwards, Isaac led her toward the old gazebo at the center of the park. It had been cleaned and decorated, strings of fairy lights twinkling above. Fallon looked around, confused. "What's going on?" she asked. Isaac turned to Thomas, who was bouncing with excitement. "You want to do the honors, buddy?" Thomas nodded enthusiastically and dug into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Fallon's heart stopped. Isaac took the box from Thomas and dropped to one knee, the world narrowing to just the two of them. "I never thought I'd find someone who could fit into my crazy little life," Isaac said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "But you walked into it like you belonged here, like you belonged with us." Fallon's hands flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "I love you, Fallon Spencer," Isaac continued. "I love the way you see people, the way you love my son, the way you make me believe in second chances. Will you marry me?" Thomas shouted. "Say yes." Fallon laughed through her tears and nodded, dropping to her knees to throw her arms around Isaac. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Cheers erupted around them from the townspeople who had been stealthily gathering nearby, and Thomas bounced in place, clapping wildly. Isaac slid the simple, elegant ring onto her finger, then kissed her, slow and sure, sealing the promise between them. They spent the rest of the afternoon celebrating in the park, with impromptu music, picnic blankets spread across the grass, and more food than they could possibly eat. Fallon danced barefoot with Thomas, twirling him until they both collapsed in laughter. Isaac joined them, pulling Fallon close, his smile so wide it made her heart ache with happiness. A few weeks later, under the same gazebo now draped with wildflowers, Fallon and Isaac stood before the town, hand in hand. Thomas beamed proudly as the best man, holding the rings on a velvet pillow. Isaac looked at her, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise to stand by you, to love you, and to build a life together that's full of laughter, trust, and family." Fallon squeezed his hands. "I promise to love you with everything I am, to be your partner in every storm, and to find joy in every ordinary day we share." The mayor pronounced them husband and wife, and Isaac kissed her with a tenderness that stole her breath away. The reception spilled out into the park, with music and dancing under the stars. Fallon laughed until her sides hurt, Slow danced with Isaac until the world faded away, and held Thomas close when he finally fell asleep against her shoulder. As the night wound down, Isaac carried Thomas to the truck, carefully tucking him into the back seat before turning to Fallon. "You ready to go home, Mrs. Sullivan?" he asked, his eyes shining. Fallon leaned up and kissed him softly. "More than ready." They drove back to the little house, the one Fallon had helped renovate with Isaac's stubborn insistence that they do it themselves. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Later, as they sat on the back porch wrapped in a blanket, Fallon rested her head on Isaac's shoulder, watching the stars. "This is better than anything I ever dreamed of," she whispered. Isaac kissed the top of her head. "It's just the beginning." Fallon smiled, feeling the warmth of Thomas sleeping inside, the steady presence of Isaac beside her, and the wide, open future stretching ahead. She had come to this town a stranger. Now she had everything she had ever wanted: a home, a family, a love that would last forever.